So I asked the question earlier. I know you and I think we talked about this last week. I'm concerned now about UNC because I don't see enough in the middle to make me feel like they can win 13 games in the league or 14 games in the league, because I think that's the number they're going to have to hit in order to have a resume that looks like an NCAA tournament team. So I asked the question this way: Are UNC's problems fixable?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this will correct itself to an extent, like once the schedule, evens out a little bit. And I think even if you go back to the LaSalle game, there were maybe some I know LaSalle's not like a great opponent or whatever, but it's not even in that game. Finally getting some Kate Tyson minutes where he looked pretty good.
Right. He's great against LaSalle.
So obviously not quite as good against Florida.
Right.
But I think getting like someone in the front court room that can add some stretch, like that would help a little bit. Or if Jalen Washington, who had promise as like a stretch shooter, at one point in his career seemingly, but has just like not been able. I think he's 0 of 7, 0 of 8 from deep this year.
Right.
They're very guard heavy. I ultimately think there's enough talent in the positions, sort of like the guard and wing positions on this roster, that in an ACC that doesn't look super duper strong, I still think North Carolina is going to win a bunch of regular season games with enough opportunities. And I ultimately think the R.J. Davis, Seth Trimble backcourt is going to be really, really good. But certainly there's an issue in the middle. The lack of sort of like a direct post hub is a problem, and perhaps even some of the issues with Elliot Cadeau recently too. I mean, I know he struggled sort of down the stretch in very like painful and obvious ways, but his play has just been kind of like below where he was at the start of the season. And obviously the shot has just like fallen off of a cliff again too. So I'll be curious to see where his role goes. He's very important for them as a driver and a passer, but they've got, a guy like Ian Jackson that's sort of just like waiting there in the wings. I do think both Duke and UNC are kind of going through something this season now. I maybe even brought this up last week when I was on with you, just like, it'd be nice if one of those teams had someone that could just dump the ball into.
Right.
And you wouldn't have to run pick and roll and get the right coverage and make the right pass or hit a shot or something like that. But you could just get the ball in a position where and Duke has this to an extent with Cooper. He's drawn a lot of fouls and he can score in the post too, but he can't just overwhelm someone. He's not Ben Caro or Baycott, some of these real like tank interior players. And Duke never really has something like that in Patrick Gongba, but obviously he's sort of physically not quite there this season, but down the line. And so it's just gonna be tough for them, I think, to find automatic offense every single game. That said, I don't think the offense is necessarily the problem for UNC. They're still playing with good pace. They're still a top 25 offense, and they're going to make more threes as the season goes along.
Brian Geisinger is joining us here, and that's really, for me, the real problem. There's the one problem on offense that which manifests itself not having the big man, for me, is that they're not a good offensive rebounding team. I mean, they're at best decent at offensive rebounding, but they're also not a good defensive rebounding team. I mean, Florida killed them on the offensive glass. 41% of their misses, Florida collected. But it's not that they're just getting killed. It's just that they're not killing the other. They're still just giving away too much. I think they're in the 200s in terms of offensive rebounding, and they're not great at defensive rebounding. And Carolina used to live on the offensive glass, and now they don't. And now they do, and the backcourt to me is too small, even though Trimble plays bigger. I think the backcourt right now is too small to be really good defensively.
That's definitely part of it too, with Cadeau and Davis. Like, you've got two sort of smaller guards, and they're on pace to be, the worst offensive rebounding team UNC's had in 20 years. Of which I believe Armando Baycott was there for 17 of those. So
that's why one more year. Is it too much to ask? One more year of eligibility for him?
Gold, all good things must come to an end, man. Sorry.
My gosh, I just that's my gift. That's what I want North Carolina to have. But yeah, the offensive rebounding for Carolina right now, they're in the two, like 225. Defensive rebounding, they're just over 100. So we're used to North Carolina dominating the glass, and they're not. I think the three ball for R.J. Davis will come back. It's kind of alarming that we're 10 games into the season and he's at 25%.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, like, his role is a little different this season too, to an extent. Like, there isn't this like interior threat to play off of. But he's been a very good pick and roll, guard shooter and scorer for several years now. I'm pretty confident that maybe he won't get up to the 40% number he hit last season, but like, I'm not too worried. I don't think he's going to be, missing 75% of his threes for the rest of the season. Like, I think this is he'll start to like get going from there, and that will help some. But obviously, like, some of these more, larger structural issues, like kind of what you said at the top, like, some of those things aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know that the front court stuff is fixable. I think there are decent players there. I mean, I don't mean to knock them. I don't see impact players that they can put at the 5. And I don't know that stretch 4 is something that like if you have a 5, then the stretch 4 is really good. I don't know. To me, they need a 5 way more than they need more stretch 4s. I love the 5 guys they can put on the perimeter, and I would consider Keatts Tyson as one of those guys also, maybe 6 if he can get into the rotation on a regular basis. Because I like Powell and I like Jackson, and I think Cadeau's biggest problem is that right now he's overly emotional, and it's not overly emotional in a good way, right? I think he's kind of in his own head at this point. The turnovers are as big a problem as the fact that he's not shooting the ball very well at all. Let me ask you the same thing about State. And this is not about whether or not, I mean, they were always going to be a fringe tournament team anyway. But if I was going to ask for a gift for the Wolfpack, the end of last year's Michael O'Connell, that would be good.
That would be a good place. Just last thing, UNC was also really close to winning several of these games too. And,
right.
We could be talking about the season differently for them, but yeah, with State, I mean, I might go so far as to say another season of eligibility for DJ Horn. Like one sort of like special guard shooter for them would, I think, really cause everything else to sort of like fall into place. I mean, that's reductive, and I don't mean to oversimplify it, but it's like it would allow O'Connell just to sort of like shift into playmaker mode.
Right.
Jaden Taylor shifts more like, starting, it doesn't have to hunt shots as much and gets to just be like a good 3-and-D guard that can give you some catch and go drives. Marcus Hill just gets to be like, you get to just enjoy some of like all of the weird quirkiness of his game, as this like good driver who can pass and do with his left hand and has a little mid-range game, but certainly struggles as a 3-point shooter. But just like one person who could come off screens or come off the ball screens and make teams pay off the dribble, like Horn, Jaquavion Smith. State has had guys like this under, Jarkel Joyner under Kevin Keatts, sort of like special shot makers. And one person like that would, I think, like raise the floor of the offense pretty significantly. And yeah, just like it gets into a half court game, and like, they were able to pull it out against Florida State by, and even had some good moments against Kansas, almost like playing through the post a little bit, which is something that they did plenty of times in years past with DJ Burns, but like neither Ben Middlebrooks or Brendan Hundley-Hatfield are like, real like double team threats down low on the block. So even then it's not, it's still a little bit like tougher sledding. That said, I thought those two guys, the two centers for State, had a good game in Lawrence. Like, I thought both played well. They played off of one another well. In State, if they could have just squeezed a little bit more out of their pick and roll action against the Hunter Dickinson hedging in space, I mean, they maybe could have made that a little bit more of a game, but just it got out of hand at the start, and State just doesn't have the tools to, on the road against an elite defense, really like win in the half court, barring just like a big time shooting game from O'Connell or Taylor.
Yeah, and by the way, now that I've seen Kansas play 3 times against triangle schools, I think the real strength of Kansas is not up front. I think Hunter Dickinson is way overblown as a player, but I think their guards, Kansas's guards and wings,
Harris, Mayo.
Oh my gosh, are they good? I love
Riley Griffin, who's been up and down too. Yeah, they went into they brought DeJuan Harris back for his sixth season, and they went to the portal and got Mayo, Griffin, and Storr. And this Storr's an NBA prospect, so is Griffin, and Mayo is a really, really impressive college player that's been huge for them so far this season.
Yeah, I think Kansas is legit. Let me ask you one more thing before I let Brian Geisinger go. 24/7 Sports Buzzbeat podcast, Pack Pride. Split the action on the Substack. You got to do that. So other than Duke, and we'll put Clemson in that category, and Pitt. Duke, Clemson, Pitt, I think those are the clear three best teams in the ACC. It would help if Clemson would stop losing non-conference games now. You beat Kentucky. That's awesome. But now you've lost to both Memphis and South Carolina. No bueno. Who's the next best team in the league?
I mean, I guess North Carolina, right? We're sort of like, the optimized version of them is certainly like a top four team in the league. SMU has played well so far this season. Stanford, I just need to see it. Like, it'll be interesting to see what Stanford looks like kind of like heading into and out of the holidays, because Jalen Blake's, transferred out of Duke, has been awesome out there. Maxime Reynaud, who's legit NBA prospect at center that is super skilled and coordinated and can handle and play make in the middle. But we just haven't seen it. They had a good win against California a couple of weeks ago, but they just haven't played anyone else. I like Kyle Smith a lot as a coach, so I'm putting a TBD next to them. And same with Wake Forest, which I guess has looked somewhat encouraging with wins over BC and in the decent James Madison team. We'll see how they fare against Clemson on Saturday. That's a really big game on the road, which is they've sort of struggled on the road the last couple of seasons under Steve Forbes. So I think there's a chance that several teams can sort of jump into that spot. But I would say right now it's probably North Carolina. And then the one other team I would maybe highlight just a little bit would be we need to see Notre Dame when Marcus Burton gets back too. He's missed a handful of games now. He's the ACC Freshman of the Year last year, which was dumb because it should have been Jared McCain. But Marcus Burton's very good, and he is sort of the engine for their offense. They don't have anyone that can really replicate his playmaking and pick and roll creation. So I think there's a couple of teams that could sort of solidify themselves at that. But right now, it's pretty murky.
Brian Geisinger, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to you. I'll talk to you anyway. Appreciate your time as always.
Yeah, happy holidays to everyone.
You got it. Brian Geisinger here on the Adam Gold Show.